We're going to have another conversation about child protection because it is a recurring problem within this country. And there's an interview that Peter Credlin did with Mat Bach, who's a Liberal member for in the lower house in Victoria. And I believe he's the Shadow Minister for Child Protection. Now, Matthew had experience himself as a ward of the state, and he has come through that in a very miraculous way, I think, in that he's gone to university, he's got a doctorate, and he is a very intelligent, smart young man who has had the experiences of living within the care system, and he has survived it. And 10 out of 10 for him for that, because not many people do. So in this interview with Credlin, he talks about his experiences. They touch at the end of this interview on adoption, which is another subject that needs to be discussed as well, because it's not the solution to the child protection system. But it is interesting to note that a man who has been through this system himself is unable to identify the changes that needs to take place within this system. Now, I've taught on many videos about the child protection system, either on this channel or on the Child Protection Party channel, and I've outlined the changes that need to take place as a social worker who's worked in this area for some time. But no one ever seems to listen to the things that I have to say in relation to this. What would I know? But clearly these people do, but they don't offer any solutions. So I'm going to play some of this interview that Credlin had with Mat Bach, and I'll stop it along the way and we'll talk about some of the issues that he doesn't talk about as he's discussing this with her.
Statistic that shames the state of Daniel Andrews, Victoria. Last year, 65 boys and girls known to child protection lost their lives. We know it thanks to leaked documents. Many of these children were left in dangerous homes even after multiple warnings to child protection. Now, it is beyond unacceptable. The Victorian Liberal MP and Shadow Child Protection Minister, Dr. Mat Bach, this is an incredibly personal issue.
Even though they make this about Victoria, it needs to be understood that this situation in relation to child protection is not just about Victoria. It's about every jurisdiction in Australia. No one is able to get their handle around child protection and the number of deaths that happen of kids that are either known to the system or happened while they're in the care of this system. So we need to find solutions to this. And I was hoping when I first saw this interview that Bach would be able to present us with some ideas as someone who has lived it about how to solve this problem. You work out for yourself whether or not he was able to do that.
This is an incredibly personal issue. He joins me now from Melbourne. Matt, you started your life in care as a ward of the state. You're now a Member of Parliament in the same state. That's a pretty powerful change of circumstances. How's your experience of the child protection system in Victoria influenced you as a policymaker?
Well, thanks, Peter. In particular, my experience, I think, has given me a really unique understanding about how our care system can be a really powerful force for good. So for me, being born into the care system has never held me back. I spent the first 14 months or so of my life as a ward of the state, as you say, and the chief adoption officer.
Matthew's experience of the child protection system is a rarity. It isn't that it doesn't happen, but the reality is that there are more kids who are damaged, who are traumatised from this system than not. And we need to be mindful of that. His experience are fortunate. There are certainly lots of foster parents out there who do the right thing, who are able to look after kids appropriately and provide them with the best opportunities they can in life. And I appreciate that, and I'm not diminishing any foster parent who does do that tremendous work with kids. There are many of them out there. But for a lot of kids, just being in the child protection system in itself is a traumatic experience. His experiences are more rare than they are common.
And the chief adoption officer at the Brotherhood of St James and St John was my legal guardian before ultimately I was adopted by a wonderful family, my family. And they called me Matthew because that name means gift from God. That's how loved and supported I've always been. So I know how the care system can be a powerful force for good, but as you said in your intro, Peter, that's not under Dan Andrews how our care system operates. In fact, for a record number of vulnerable Victorian children, being born into the care system is literally a death sentence.
And you say it's in crisis. You look at those statistics, 65 children dead, 65 children dead, and many of them left in homes where authorities were warned on multiple occasions that they were in threat of their lives. How does that happen?
Well, I think there have been years and years of failures that the Andrews Labor government hasn't wanted to seriously look at and seriously address. I do think things got even worse last year as a result of the COVID bungles of the Andrews Labor government, but still we can't.
He was asked how did that happen? How did so many children become either abused, sexually assaulted, and even died under this system? And he goes straight to blaming the Labor government for the lockdowns, which is a thing. That's what you do in Victoria, apparently. If you're not a Labor supporter, you'll blame Dan Andrews for being Dan Andrews and for locking the state down as he did. But it doesn't offer a solution to the problem, Matt. You're asked to define what the problem is. You know the problem because you lived within it. Or is it that the problem for you was that there was no problem because you had good foster parents and you were adopted? Now, I don't know whether he was first 14 months he was in foster care and then he was adopted to another family. Not certain of the circumstances around any of that, but it is not the experience of most of the children who are in foster care. So we need to be mindful of that his experiences are unique.
Of the Andrews Labor government, but still we can't look past ongoing failures that watchdogs like our Children's Commissioner in particular have been seeking to shine a light on for such a long time. So 65 children known to the Andrews Labor government died last year in the care system. That's a macabre record in the history of our state, up 150% since 2018 alone. We saw sexual offences against children rise by 88% last year here in Victoria. 1 in 10 young Indigenous Victorians tonight, Peter, 1 in 10 is in the care of the state. That's worse than any other Australian jurisdiction, even the Northern Territory, which we know has such serious problems. And so you're right, we most certainly are in a dire child protection crisis. And coming back to your question, what troubles me so deeply about that is that clearly, even today, even after all of these revelations, Dan has no plan to fix this crisis that he and his government has created.
Yeah, but the fact is, mate, neither do you. You keep telling us what the problem is. We know what the problem is. We've been putting up with this for decades, right? But you do not offer a solution to the problem. Give us a solution. And, most of us would be delighted, those of us who work within this area would be delighted to know what the answer is. Stop telling us, and this is what we hear from politicians all the time, is we hear them telling us what the problem is. We know the friggin' problem. Please offer us a solution.
Created.
What impact did, we've had 4 lockdowns in Victoria, but the big one last year, 111 days, what sort of impact did that have on the system?
Well, the whistleblower that you talked about in your intro, Peter, said that the long lockdown did make it harder for child protection workers and for workers at other charities here in Victoria to get out and to seek to care for and protect vulnerable children. Last year, we know that sexual offences against children rose by a staggering 88%. And one of the reasons for that is we know that some very vulnerable children were locked in their homes for 23 hours a day with their abusers under a curfew for which there was no medical evidence. So the COVID bungles of the Andrews Labor government and its failures in hotel quarantine and contact tracing did have an impact, but I don't want to overplay that impact, because over many, many years, the Andrews Labor government has been warned about its child protection failures and the impact that would have. For example, in 2017, independent research from Social Ventures Australia said that unless there was a new plan to fix Victoria's child protection system, we'd see a doubling of the number of kids in care in our state to 26,000.
Okay, but what is your plan, Dan? Matt. What is your plan, Matt? What are you planning to do that is different? How are you providing a solution to this problem, given you had experiences within the system? I am so frustrated that even someone who has experienced what this system is like, and who, even though they had a good experience, why they can't define for us the way out of the problem, apart from just telling us what the problem is. We know what the problem is. It's been the same for years. At least offer us a solution.
In care in our state to 26,000 by just 2026, and that a huge proportion of those kids would be Indigenous kids. But still, the government produced no plan. COVID hit, and that did make matters worse.
When you talked about your personal story before, you make it clear that adoption was your salvation, that you had a family that raised you, that loved you, that's given you, all the advantages in life, and you've absolutely taken them and run with them. I don't know the Victorian system as familiar as you do, but I had a lot of exposure to the work of Prue Goward in New South Wales, who took on the institutional reluctance of the officials and the bureaucrats to adopt children out that were in
Prue was a disaster in New South Wales. Nothing changed as a result of Prue Goward's involvement and as the Chief Executive Officer in New South Wales. Nothing significantly changed as a result of that. So to highlight her, because she is right-wing, to highlight her as an example of how a system could change is disingenuous, because she wasn't able to change a thing. No one has been able to. And again, we're looking to adoption as the solution to the problem. It is not a solution to the problem. And we've got to stop going there.
To adopt children out that were in long-term care. And she took the view that families had, a couple of years with all the resources of the state to get their life back on track. But after that time, she didn't really want to see children in a constant perpetuity of foster care home after foster care home or institutionalised care, that they deserved a chance of a permanent home.
The state does not offer all the resources that are needed. We know that early intervention is part of a solution to this problem. The fact is that there aren't enough early intervention programs. There aren't enough social workers looking at ways to intervene with families that are appropriate. And I could go on and talk about all this stuff, which I've talked about many, many times before. But adoption does not solve the problem. Early intervention does. Helping families to be able to deal with the issues that sit in their lives does help resolve this issue. But to be able to say that this is the overarching solution, which is adoption, which is what Credlin's saying, shows that she doesn't understand this problem at all. And Matt, because he had a good experience and was adopted, for some reason that seems to be the solution. Well, I'm telling you guys, it ain't.
That they deserved a chance of a permanent home and a family. What's your view on that?
I certainly think that far more needs to be done to provide our most vulnerable kids with greater permanency. So, as you said, we see so many vulnerable Victorian kids bouncing from one foster care placement to the next. Now, I think foster care is angels. I was in foster care. And yet, wherever possible, it would be fantastic to see vulnerable Victorian kids in more permanent placements. You're right, just like in other jurisdictions, there has been a real reluctance to look at more permanent options, and they include adoption. Certainly, my personal story isn't a hard luck story, it's a good luck story, and for large part, that's down to the love and care of my family. So I'd love to see.
So why aren't we able to create environments which are longer lasting in foster care? Like, he raises a good issue, and it's a truthful issue, is that kids do bounce from one foster placement to another. Normally that's because foster parents choose to no longer foster kids, they've had enough, they have disruptive children, those children also disrupt their own family and their own kids, and some of the behavioural problems that some foster kids have, or kids who are in care, are extreme. Understand all of that, and I've taught about therapeutic foster care, and that's something they're trying to implement here in South Australia in a very limited way. Haven't heard much about that over the last 12 months since they've instigated it. So what is it that we need to change? Well, he's still, after this conversation with Credlin, doesn't offer a solution.
Of my family. So I'd love to see far more Victorian kids provided with the sort of opportunities that I've had. Right now we know, under Dan Andrews and under this Labor government, that's certainly not the case.
I tell you what, it's a tough topic to talk about, child protection.
Again, no solution at all from Credlin, because she doesn't understand the problem, and no solution from Mat, because he lived through the perfect system, apparently. So this is my frustration, and I don't mind expressing it. I get angry because no politician, no matter who they are, no matter what colour stripe they come from, still doesn't provide a solution for this very, very significant problem. And as a community, I get more and more distressed, I think, because as a community, we don't seem to generally care about kids. We don't. We don't think about these kids because they're second-class citizens. They're children to start with, and why should we worry about kids? We should, because they turn out to be adults, disruptive, dysfunctional adults who have dysfunctional relationships. So, and that is a cost to our system. That is a mental health issue, a physical health issue. And it's, it's a domestic violence issue. It's a mental well-being issue. It's so many problems are associated with kids in care and how they function in our society as adults. So we need to be doing something about it. You and I need to work together to bring about a solution. So let me know what you think down below. Subscribe to my channel, put comments in, and contact me on my email address. Thanks everybody for being with me. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.